So, good evening, everyone. Welcome. I am Christine Quinn, and I am the founder of Living Kindness. And Living Kindness is a nonprofit, and we're a recovery community for families who have a loved one struggling with substance misuse. So, it's great to have an opportunity to be with you tonight. At Living Kindness, we're about creating community and also about learning. And sometimes learning takes place in nature. Sometimes we're in the art studio, and tonight we're online. So, learning together about grief and also listening to each other's stories to see how we might support each other and learn from those stories as well. And tonight, Cheryl Hancock is our presenter. And so we're going to start with Cheryl sharing her story and engaging us. And then then we'll have a discussion. So it'll be open to question and answer. And then we'll give you some updates on some future opportunities that there might be with Living Kindness. Does that sound all right? And I wanted to tell you too that we are recording this so that we can use it so other people can access the information. Is everybody okay with that? And Cheryl and I go back a little bit. We graduated from high school together, so just a few years ago, right, Cheryl? Just a few years ago.
50. We had our class reunion 2 weeks
She
ago.
blew it. She blew it. We just had a class reunion, and she was one of the organizers. But Cheryl has had a very full career in nonprofit leadership and has committed her life to creating opportunities and for healing for others. She's done that through her leadership. She's also done it through fundraising and has raised millions of dollars. Her most recent was Cooley Recovery Center, which she spearheaded an effort to create a new facility there and new programming. But her story goes much deeper than that. And tonight she's going to share her story about the loss of her daughter. And so she shares that story so that we all can learn and we can embrace the journey that we are on. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl.
Wow, thank you, Chris.
Mhm.
So I like to talk about Jess's life. Jess was my daughter. She was born the day before my birthday. Actually, we share the 26th of December. Mine is the 27th of December. So we share that holiday Christmas kind of um event. It always had been a full week for us, but Jess was just a great young woman. So I try to share the story of how she lived, of her life, before I get into the grief part, because in a way to honor her. I think as a parent who lost a loved one of the things we fear the most is them being forgotten, as if they never existed. At least for me, that's one of my fears. And so I like to tell her story. Jess was a rambunctious young girl. We moved to the current community where we live now when she was in middle school, and she engaged and was involved in a number of activities. She went on to college. Her first 2 years she spent at Madison, at UW Madison. And then she came home for a weekend, and in between her sophomore and junior year in 1999. And she was in a terrific car accident, which she was med flighted from the place of the accident to the hospital in La Crosse, and then she was transferred by ambulance to Mayo Clinic in Rochester. The Gunderson did not feel they could deal with her injuries at that point in time, and so they wanted to have a higher level of treatment for her. So the choice was either UW-Madison Hospital or Mayo, and we chose Mayo just because we were more familiar with them. Um, After her recovery, and when she was discharged from the hospital, she was prescribed Oxy. And she was on Oxy. I don't remember now if it's Codone or which one, but it was for about a year and a half without any regulation. And for those who may not be aware, at that point in time, it is consistent with the time where the pain scale was introduced, where, what's your pain level, 1 to 10? And also, it was a time when pharmaceutical people were testifying in front of Congress saying that these medications were not addictive. And they knew, we come to find out now that we knew, in fact, that it was. She had a full college career. I worked on campus at UW La Crosse. She had to be transferred to UWL in order for her to continue on at college, and I was happened to be working there. And so the first 4 weeks of her college at La Crosse pushed her to class in a wheelchair because she wasn't able to walk yet, and had to make sure she did not put any weight on her legs because they were both very badly broken, and she had C2 fractures and concussion, a severe concussion, from her accident. But she, was still very active, in her college. She went on and actually graduated in 4.5 years. It took her that summer, a little bit longer, but she, was very proud of that. She actually, went and did an internship. Well, when she was in Madison, she was a page in the legislature there, and then she went when she was in La Crosse, she was able to get an internship with Paul Ryan, who was very new in his role back then, and so that was very exciting. She spent that summer in Washington, DC, and it was a great experience for her. But soon after she graduated and soon after she was in the workplace, they started to reduce her prescription, and they weren't as keen to pain management now. I mean, back then as they were now. So they really wanted to take her off this. And at first, they kind of wanted to just remove her completely. But she had a high pain levels because she was having some issues with some scar tissue and that kind of thing, especially in her neck. And they weren't, very aware. So they did take her down some, but still had her on Oxy. So I think for a good 5 years, she was still on that medication. And as they tried to reduce her levels, she had a great deal of pain and turned to illicit drugs to help her with the pain because the doctors were not being responsive to her pain, and that was an answer for her. That was something that she turned to. When our family discovered that she was it started through different uses. I know she crushed it and snorted it, and I know that she smoked it. I don't know all the details of all of how that all works, but then we discovered that she was injecting it, and so we supported her, and she went to treatment to 30 days, and heroin and she wasn't hadn't been doing meth then, but heroin is very addictive and it's very difficult to get treatment for and to be successful the first times. But she came out of treatment after 30 days, and her boyfriend at the time took her to a bar. So it's like, oh dear, just struggles. Eventually, they moved away. They decided they were going to get married, and then they moved away because I think Jess realized she was still struggling, and they moved to Colorado, and they surrounded themselves with a whole different group of people. And it was a very positive experience for her out there. In fact, well, they got married about a year and a half after they moved out there, and then pregnant and had Lucy. And so Jess said to me once, she said the best thing she's ever done in her life was be a mom. And so it was a very positive 7 years. They had about 7 years they were out there, and she was on the board of directors for the daycare center where Lucy went. She had a great job with, Breckenridge Reservations, organization, the chamber there. She, was, very happy. She seemed very happy until she didn't. And, her and her husband divorced, and when they divorced, she wanted to come back home. After a year, she stayed there for about a year, but then she wanted to come back home and be with family. So her and Lucy traveled home. And I think what happened when she came back here, I think she knew. I really think she knew that she was in trouble emotionally, mental health wise. She had underlying co-diagnosis with bipolar, so many things. She ADHD. I mean, she's been diagnosed with everything through her experience. So she came home. She wanted Lucy to be, I think, at home with family. It wasn't too soon of her being back here that she discovered that group of people that she had been hanging out with before and had a major relapse. And we spent the next 4 years with her going to treatment centers, her receiving good treatment. There's some great treatment centers, non-medical, based out of Minneapolis, the that up Wayzata, Minnesota, very good programs. The last program she went to was in Utah, and it was outstanding. But she came home, and the medical doctors here completely redid her prescriptions, and she begged them to let her stay on what they had prescribed in Utah because she was doing so well. And for whatever reason, they just didn't feel comfortable. And so they had put her on a medication that, um, one of the after side effects is feeling suicidal. And so she had a couple episodes with that, and we were trying to work with them to maybe change. But again, we were kind of pushed back, a little bit of that pushback from what we were saying. Um, and on we celebrated, Lucy, I, and Jess went to her favorite place to eat on her birthday on the 26th of December in 2016, and we had a great day, we went looking for kittens. Lucy wanted to have a kitten, so we went looking for a kitty that day, and she called me the next day on my birthday on the 27th. She wasn't living at home, but she called me and we had a great conversation. And then on the 29th of December, I got a call. Well, she had texted me early in the morning, and um, I could tell she had used because she had paranoia, and she thought there were shadow people, and she was worried that the her roommate was setting her up to be arrested. And those are very common, of some of the paranoia that I've seen her experience when she was in active use. So I was a little bit frustrated, and I said, I know that, no, please know that Chris is not doing anything to set you up. She'd never do that. I said, there are not shadow people there, but I suspect you've used, and you need to be in a safe place. Are you in a safe place? And she said yes. And I said, I don't know. I just kind of our text back and forth. I kept them. I was able to keep them for about 5 years, and then somehow I lost them, and it was like sad to me. But anyway, so then about a half an hour later, I just reached out to her and said, if you want, I can come and get you for a visit. Um, And she said, "That would be great. Thank you." And that was the last conversation we had. I had been, um, through my life, as Chris said, I had served in leadership roles in nonprofits. I worked at the university in the development office and then went to the American Red Cross, where I was the executive director there for 11 years. And then I had gone to a college, and after about 2 years, they had done some changing of their positions and things, so my position had been eliminated, and so I was looking for work, and this was in the middle of Jess and trying to support her, and the Cooley Recovery Center, or at that time, it was called Cooley Council on Addictions, and they were looking for an executive director, and I thought, "Well, maybe this would be a good way for me to learn." And, so I applied and was successful in getting that job, and I'll tell you, what I learned was that sometimes I was an overachiever in the bad way because I had gone to a family, session with this woman, and one of the things she had us do was write, "Have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? X, Y, and Z. Have you ever shamed your loved one? Have you ever threatened them? Have you ever, called them names or said things that hurt your heart or whatever?" And I had done them all. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head and realized all of that, me trying to control her, was not going to work. The lady also talked about the three C's. You did not create their addiction, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. And that for me was kind of like a light bulb where I approached Jess and we worked in a much different way together. She knew I was there to support her when she was looking for treatment, if she had relapsed, and, when she was in recovery. It was awesome. We had some great conversations in those years, but we also had some really negative experiences together. But um, I was so pleased that Cooley provided me with that opportunity to learn and to interact with other people and other families who were struggling with loved ones who were in active addiction or were in recovery, and to see that, it's such a joy. It was such a joy. But on the 29th, um, she had taken too much of her prescription drugs. She also had heroin and meth, and that car something, I can't remember, was in her. It's like the elephant drug or something, or the horse. Yeah, that was in her reports after she passed away. But so they called and said she had shown up at work. I was not working that day, but that she had shown up at work and she was in trouble physically. And so they had called the ambulance, and the ambulance came, and I met them at the hospital. And very difficult. I I walked in the room and I'm like, she's not here. They were doing CPR on it. And because one of the medicines they had given her, my doctor later told me, and oh, I am so sorry. My phone is ringing. But they had told me um that her heart, um they were doing CPR because they wouldn't that's the only way they could keep a heartbeat going. And so I had to make that decision to, allow them to stop. And it was very difficult time, few minutes and hours. But Lucy, her daughter, was 8 years old at the time, and my husband, her grandpa, had to go get her and bring her to the hospital. We wanted, her to be able to say goodbye to her mom at the hospital and everything. So Um, so we did, and I will tell you those next few days, hours, and then days were like a it was like I was in a movie watching my life kind of go with me looking in or something. It was kind of like a shadow life. Um, but I of course did what I usually do and I just threw myself into work. I mean, my board of directors, we had just initiated this capital campaign, made one ask in early December. So my board was kind of wondering what's going to happen from here. And then her funeral was on Tuesday, and the next Monday I went back to work. And they were kind of surprised. And but work helped me because I was in a community of people in recovery, so many people that knew Jess, knew of her. Um, but I really didn't deal with my grief then. I just kind of ignored it and put it off to the side. After a few years, we continued. We had a successful campaign. It was awesome. We built a beautiful new 13,000 square foot building, a place for people to come to find recovery. And one of the benefactors for the building, the one who gave the most, I was going doing a little phone tag with the woman, back and forth, and we were doing name recognition for the rooms, and they were going to have the biggest room they could choose to have it named in their honor or their business. And I'm in lacrosse, and the business is one that you probably would be very familiar with, the Quick Trip family. And I got was on the phone with Levon, and I said the big room, the great room, we'd like to name it in your honor. And she said, well, because I had left her a message, she said, well, Don and I have been talking, and she said, we wondered if you would allow us to name it in your daughter's honor. And it was like I cried and, all of that stuff. But that just going to work then every day and seeing Jess's picture and all of that brought me a lot of comfort, but still wasn't dealing with my grief. It took me a while. Finally, what happened was that one of the women that's in the grief group that we formed, she came to me and she said, we need to do something because she had just lost a son. We need to do something. What can we do, Cheryl? We have to do something. She was adamant that her and I together were going to do something. So, in thinking about it, I knew someone from the Lacrosse Spirituality Center and reached out to them and decided to do a workshop at our place at the Cooley building on grief. And we called it a complicated grief. And so from then, I started everything I kind of was doing was in Jess's honor. But that workshop, that one of the sisters came and presented to us. It was a 5-week workshop, and it was awesome. I mean, they taught us the stages of grief. We talked about the stages of grief. We talked about why is loss to substance use, whether it's alcoholism or drug use, overdose, fentanyl, huffing, anything, car accidents related to that. If your loved one died and was in a car accident and they were under the influence, why is it complicated? And what we found was it's because of the stigma of the disease that they died from. And keep in mind that we recognize our folks are much more than their disease. That's why I wanted to share with you about Jess's life, because she was much more than the disease that took her. Like cancer, not everyone survives, not everyone recovers. And it took me living through the grief to understand that and recognize that. But it is complicated because not only do you have that denial, the anger, the depression, and acceptance, you also have that guilt, the what ifs, shoulda, coulda, wouldas. What if I had just done this? What if I, X, Y, and Z? And so you're living with that. And then when you're interacting in public or you're interacting even with family and friends, you hear things like, well, they chose to do that. If they had just not chosen to do this, if they um, had made better decisions. Oh, you need to get over it. People say things like that, and it's just like scratching a chalkboard almost. And many of the people that came together for that workshop had heard those things. And I will say, I am blessed to have a circle of friends and family that have never said anything like that, but I suspect some think it from time to time because talking about grief with people or talking about loss with people who are uncomfortable, maybe in their own grief, sometimes makes them uncomfortable. So they may not say things what they're really feeling. But we learned that finding your people was a big key to how to deal with your grief. Finding your circle that can recognize and share the same situations that you have, that you need to find those outlets, that's one thing that you can do for yourself is find that circle, find those outlets so that you can interact and just sometimes just vent and have that opportunity to vent. And so from this group, I will say it's a blessing. We I don't go as often as I used to because I don't work in the town or I'm not in town as much as I used to be. But this group was great. We kind of, from the grief workshop that we had, we continue to meet. And now 3 years later, we're still meeting. And what we do is we start each day or each meeting with we use the healing after loss. It's daily intentions. We try to do that. We start with the daily intention. And then we just kind of open it up and people will talk. At first, we did a lot of sharing about our loved ones because we were new to each other. And we shared a lot about our loved ones, and we shared a lot about how we were going through this journey of grief and what had happened this last week related to your grief or related to your loved ones. Some people were so fresh and so new, they were still dealing with estates and things like that. So we would have that great hour and a half to really talk about those kind of things that they didn't feel comfortable talking about with other people. And then we would end with it's a poem. It's called We Remember Them. And it's what we would do is everybody would read one of the verses and then we would go around the room and say their names. And so we would say each of their names as we go around the room again, because we fear as parents, as there's spouses in our group, there are parents, there's a brother of a loved one who, passed. So a brother is in our group. So we try to recognize and say their name then at the end of every meeting. Now, this group has expanded and we do things. Well, the Cooley Center, when we built the new building, we had this little garden area. And the group kind of noticed it was in disarray. The person we were working with, a college, they were supposed to be coming and weeding and all of this stuff. And so that wasn't happening. So then the group is kind of like, "Well, let's go out and weed this time." So we'd go out and weed the garden. And now we have um then the group from Viterbo left and we were not able to keep track keep up with the vegetables. So they've got this beautiful memorial garden now. And we have rocks that the grief group then will get together and painted our loved ones' names and shellacked it and put those rocks out in the garden. We've done some planting. We have fenced it in. It's a beautiful place. There's a couple benches in there, so we go in and just sit. And they've done some plantings to attract butterflies. And so just being in your space. And people have talked about how, well, now they're doing those kind of things at home. And when they're at home and all by themselves and isolated, they're doing those kind of things. So we have a great excitement around that garden and have done a lot of work on that. But I also would say finding one of the things I learned was you about finding your circle of people. Initially, I started online on Facebook. There's a group called Grasp. It's GRASP, and it was a great group for me to be in. Initially, I was there because I needed to know how to respond. I just needed to have other people talk and share the same experiences. And then after a while, I became kind of one of those people who welcomed the new people in and worked with them and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where we are today. Our grief group, it really has helped and supported a great number of people along the way. Want to look at my notes because I know I'm about to the time where we wanted to do some Q&A. Yeah, I think that's about it. And so we've got about little less than a half an hour for some Q&A and for some questions. So I hope that is of help. I will tell you, I know there's some kids that Tammy had with her. My granddaughter was 8 when she lost her mom. She's 17 now. And um, I have really let her guide me in how we approach and talk about her mom. And I loved how open those kids were, though, about their experience. Because some kids I know that Lucy has interacted with, because she has had a classmate who lost a loved one. They did not want to talk about it at all, and she kind of let them go. But it's great if you can be open about it. I've let Lucy, I know a teacher wanted her to talk in class about it, and that was not Lucy's thing. And so we talked back and forth, and made sure that the teacher honored that and recognized that, because when she brought it up in class once, it made Lucy very uncomfortable. But we have some great talks about her mom and those sorts of things. I will say, oh, I do know one thing. I went to a spiritualist 2 years ago, and that was a life changer for me also. The woulda, shoulda, couldas, ifs, onlys, she answered those questions without me even asking, which was remarkable for me. It was a life changer. I felt like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders when Jess came to my place of work and the ambulance came. What the spiritualist, she didn't know any of the details. She just said that where she came and was picked up by the ambulance is where her soul left her body. So all that they were doing and me making that decision was not, and that is something that had weighed me down for those first 5 years. It weighed me down. I thought, did I make that choice too soon? Should I have waited? That kind of thing. Um, and that spiritualist, Jess wanted to tell me that there was nothing I could do. She was already gone by the time she got to the hospital. and some other details and things. But I will tell you, I was very skeptical about it at first. It took me 5, 6 years before I did it, and I'm trying to get back into her, but she's so busy that I have to make an appointment for March. I think is the first I can get into her for this next year. But I just say that to say do things that you might not have normally done. It can hurt. And for me, it really helped. So let's open it up to some questions.
Thank you so much, Cheryl.
Oh,
We just appreciate how open you are and vulnerable to share that story. So thank you.